All right, everybody, this is E. Marcel Pertut, and welcome to another edition of their Verbal Submission Podcast, where we discuss everything all mixed martial arts and professional wrestling. Hope you are doing well out there. We are finally recording a exclusive show based on those two entities. We've touched on it on our Sports Inquirer show, which I highly recommend that you listen to on our site. Just do a search on there on sportsinquirer.net. Or if you go to our Twitter and Instagram or Facebook pages, just search Sports Inquirer. You will be able to get our archives of previous shows and including as well go to our YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes pages. And once again, you get the archives of all our previous Sports Inquirer shows as well as verbal submission shows from our past. But we have not devoted a show exclusively to all things professional wrestling and mixed martial arts in a while. And now it's time for us to do that. I think it's a good time to discuss all those things with the Royal Rumble from WWE coming up this Sunday. We're recording this, by the way, on January 29th, 2021. So we have a Royal Rumble coming up this Sunday. All things New Japan Pro Wrestling. I'm gonna do a recap of the Wrestle Kingdom, which was the New Year's Day or New Year's Week show, and kind of the fallout from that as we're going through New Beginning. And I will touch on Conor McGregor's loss to Dustin Poirier and what it means for him and the UFC throughout the show. But as I mentioned, I got through all my plugs early talking about the archives. But once again, I said just go social media wherever you go to. Our main ones are Twitter, Instagram, and sports and Facebook, and you just search Sports Inquirer and you'll find us. You could also go to, as I said, our YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes pages, and you'll be able to get our shows and get everything that we have going on. I'll start with New Japan and everything that's going on in that world. And I think if I go over the Wrestle Kingdom card, it'll translate into what's been going on over the past few weeks as they go through New Beginning. I've been very interested in Takahashi or Hiromu. We'll call him Hiromu because there's another Takahashi and it gets confusing and all that stuff. I've been intrigued by what they've been doing with the light heavyweight division. But I mean, Hiromu has really become, I think, the biggest face in New Japan. And it's tough to say if he's the biggest face for several reasons. One, there are other guys in the running, which we'll get to throughout the show. But the lack of large crowds in Japan and the lack of reaction really hurts in that regard, as far as we can determine if he's getting the biggest cheers or the biggest chants. Because the if you've been watching the shows, you're allowed to clap and you're allowed, I guess, to stomp your feet, but you're not allowed to make any verbal sounds as far as chanting names and things like that. But I think he's become really the rock star of New Japan, and we've seen Tanahashi have that role in the past and many others. But I think he's become the guy that if you're 35 and under, you are really into what you're seeing from Takahashi. And he regained the Super Junior. He regained the light heavyweight championship. Well, first of all, he earned the opportunity by winning the Best of Super Juniors. So he won that crown. That's why he has the trophy with the one wing. And he was able to beat the Super J Cup champion and El Phantasmo in the first night of Wrestle Kingdom, and then beat Ishimura for the Ultimate Championship that he has right now. I'm intrigued. I like what they're doing with them because with the separation or the combination of the Intercontinental title and the Heavyweight Championship, you're really seeing a lack of secondary titles being involved. That's why I think the Intercontinental Championship was very important for to help build other guys up. And we've seen the Never Open Weight Championship kind of take on that role. But still, I like that you have guys in that light heavyweight division, really stepping up. Him facing Show in the upcoming few shows, obviously with the Roppongi 3K is not together right now because Yo is out with the knee injury. Show has really stepped his game up and become a number one contender. I think Hiromu is going to keep the title, but it's also Show has taken the advantage of the opportunity to put himself, in a major way as far as putting himself in contention. So I think that's been really good. And no tears for El Phantasmo and Ishimori, because they are now the light heavyweight tag team champions. They were able to win that title a few days ago, and this is good also because I was looking at the cards and I've been seeing the when we go to WWE and especially with AEW. We'll talk about AEW as well. I forgot to mention them in my intro. You see so much heat, so many heels, and so many bad guys, and a lot of heat, and that's what they're trying to build on. It's getting to the point where bad guys are facing bad guys, and that's awkward. And where as a watching the show, you want to root for somebody to either win or lose. That's professional wrestling 101. But those lines are getting so blurred. I think it's good with and when New Japan they're dealing with that a little bit as well because you look at the factions and Jay White and I will get to Jay in a moment, but the Bullet Club has really stepped up as the faction, the bad guy faction in in New Japan because who you're gonna really cheer against when we're gonna get to Chaos is good guys. I think Los Incorporables de Japón, which Hiromu is interestingly enough a part of, and Naito being the leader. It's kind of supposed to be the bad guys, but Naito's over, Hiromu is over in a big way, Sanada. So they've kind of got into the camp of being good guys. You could say that Suzuki Gun would be considered bad guy, especially with Tai Chi and Zack Sabre to do bad guy antics. But now they're feuding with Bullet Club and with Guerrillas of Destiny. So that's another kind of bad guy versus bad guy. And I think in the end, there you can see the fans obviously, and I said it's not a complete accurate account from my end, but you're starting to see the fans kind of lean towards Saber and Tai Chi when it comes to that feud. So Bullet Club is taking us up in a really good way, I think, as far as enemies and having hold of the light heavyweight championship and Phantasmo, who I think has really stepped up as being a top foreign guy there, who has you talk about the boot, whether it's weighted or illegal with the super kick. He's really taken advantage of that, and that's been kind of an interesting storyline and subplot. So that's been really good. Another good subplot we've seen is with the Guerrillas of Destiny, and as I mentioned, the with the Saber and Tai Chi, God was able to win the World Tag. They won the World Tag League, and they were able to regain the championships at Wrestle Kingdom, Tangaloa and Tamatanga. The Tamatanga stealing I guess the Iron Fist or Iron Hand from Tai Chi is a little silly in my opinion. But professional wrestling sometimes needs some silliness in it, and but I think that it's a good feud. I wish they wrestled a little bit more during the build up to New Beginning until uh, up to some of the title matches or the rematch, but maybe they're keeping them away from each other. Maybe a good thing because sometimes when you have these matches leading up to the actual championship competition, you get it gets diluted because you see them so much in these exhibitions before they actually face each other. They've done the opposite approach to it, like we've seen Sanada and Kota Ibushi in the ring multiple times now before they even get to their title match. So they've already faced each other, they've punched each other, kicked each other, and we're still we're still anticipating the actual title match when it comes up. But we've already seen them in the ring together. There's less excitement when that happens. I think we haven't seen Saber and Tai Chi against God since that title match at Wrestle Kingdom. So I think that's good that they've kept them separate until they actually face each other in that way. I also want to see John Moxley finally face Kenta, and we haven't seen Kenta too much on this tour. I said leading up with these new beginnings, he won or he retained the New Japan. He's a rights holder to the IWGP U.S. Heavyweight Championship. He defeated Kojima in the match to retain it. It was supposed to be Juice Robinson facing Kenta, but Juice suffered an eye injury and was out. So Kojima stepped up, the OG, one of the OGs in New Japan, gave a good solid effort, but Kenta ultimately won it. We saw the video with Moxley say that whoever wins the or has the rights to the contract for the heavyweight championship, or the U.S. heavyweight championship, he's coming for them or he's waiting for him. I'm interested to see what they do as far as that goes. Well, I think what we're seeing, from what I'm hearing, and I don't have a lot of sources, but I mean, I read a lot and kind of keep up with what's going on. I guess that Moxley, who obviously wrestles in AEW, is unable to travel to Japan to fight that match, and I can understand for travel reasons because I think, if I'm correct, if you travel to Japan, that's isolation and quarantine for 14 days alone, just flying into Japan. So that means that if you fly into Japan, you got to wait 14 days in your hotel room or an isolated area before you're even able to fight. That's not good. If you're a wrestler like Moxley, that's a major player in AEW, which is based in the United States. I guess Kenta can come over to the United States and be part of their a United States card if they have one of those. I don't know, but it's really getting to the point where I look at Kenta as the title holder with the briefcase. He's done a very good job of, and he uses that briefcase all the time. I like that he is getting himself involved in that regard. And so I'm looking forward to when those two guys finally meet, Kenta and John Moxley. Going into the Wrestle Kingdom, I thought it would be a bad night for the Empire or the Grand Empire, whatever the faction of obviously Will Ospreay, who's the leader of the group, along with the Great Okan and with Jeff Cobb. I thought all those guys would not be successful in their single matches. And sure enough, that's what happened. The one I really thought was going out of all of them, I thought that the one that really wasn't going to happen was Great Okan beating Tanahashi. I think it was for two reasons. One, I mean, Okan, and I like his character. I've seen mixed messages from people about it. I enjoy it. He's a big wrestler. He's got size to him. He's got an interesting character. His move set is good. I think it's going to develop over time. You have to be very careful with these character wrestlers, just like the Great Wado, not the Great, a Master Wado. I'm kind of mixed on him. I think he's a good kid, a young talent, but that gimmick, he's just so stuck with it that I don't think he could do anything beyond it. Okan is kind of a character guy as well, and that's why you have to be very careful with uh, these guys first come over from excursion. Like the extreme examples, when when Okada came back from his excursions, he was Okada. I mean, he only has the Rainmaker and some other little gimmicks, but still, it's Okada. Even Jay White, when he came back as a Switchblade, sure that's a character, it's a bad guy Switchblade. We all know what that means, but it's still Jay White in a way. That's still him. Great Okan and Master Wado, first of all, they're not going by their kind of real names. They're going by these characters, these kind of gimmicks. And it's like, what happens when Okan 2, 3 years from now does not Okan anymore, and he goes back to maybe it's a very interesting. And the same thing with Wado. I'm just not confused, or I don't like what I'm seeing from those guys, but you just got to be very careful with it. But going back to the match itself against Tanahashi, I thought that it was a very good match. I think Tanahashi, and I like, well, he's trying to go with going for the open weight title now, with the never open weight, which I like. But I thought that this was going to be a good opportunity for a Great Okan to be on his first time in the dome in a singles match. I thought it was a good way to introduce him to that in a special singles match. I think Tanahashi, I'm not saying he's going to retire anytime soon, but obviously he's at the back end of the career, and he's probably maybe shortlist, maybe the top 4 or 5 all-time Japanese wrestlers in history. Look it up. We could do a whole podcast on his impact on New Japan and what he's meant to it and his championship runs and all that stuff. But obviously he's not in the heavyweight title picture right now. If there was an intercontinental opportunity, I think he'd be right there for it. But it was good for him. I think it was a nice, solid moment, him in the dome, to win that match. I mentioned with Hiromu being the most over guy in New Japan. I think Tanahashi is right up there with them as far as I said, the 35 and under guys. You really like Hiromu, but if you're 35 and up and know a little bit more history of New Japan, it's very hard to be bad against Tanahashi. So I thought that was a good win for him in that regard. Okada was going to beat Will Ospreay. It's a good matchup. Obviously, Ospreay is kind of the little brother in that dynamic. He came over to Japan and got himself involved in New Japan because of Okada, and obviously turned on Okada, and that's a nice little storyline that they've had going. I think Will has a chance to be. Well, I keep saying he's being an elite guy so young. Okada's not even 35. Well, I think he's in his mid 30s by now, if that. Another special talent. Some say he's greatest of all time already, and the guy probably has 10 solid more years of wrestling. But anyway, I thought that Okada winning this match was expected. Went 35 plus minutes. Showed Osprey got to show off a lot of his moves. We've seen him evolve from a little guy as a light heavyweight that did a lot of flying and jumping. But now Osprey, he still can get up. But I think it's been good that you've seen his style evolve and change and be different. And I think these two, they aren't done with each other by any means as far as feuding goes. But I think for right now, Okada winning that matchup was a very good thing for because it gives now, and then we'll get to Cobb. He lost his match as well. I think this makes them gives that the kingdom. If they all won, where do they go from there? I mean, obviously they could go different places, but I think the fact that all three of those guys lost gives them an edge and an anger that they're now going to be edgier and be more involved and be more of a bad guy group. So I think that them losing these matches really leads towards that. And then finally, for the first night of Wrestle Kingdom, we saw Kota Ibushi become the double champion by defeating Naito. And by the way, I wish I put money on these matches because I think I went a perfect for all the matches. I predicted every single result correctly. I'm not bragging. Listen to our previous show. We did a preview of Wrestle Kingdom. I predicted all of these matches correctly, and I'm not. Obviously, I know about a lot about my wrestling, and I follow it every day. But my thing was, if you looked at the predictions and figured it out, as far as the heavyweight championship went, my thing was this: we've seen Kota Ibushi for the past few years be kind of the bridesmaid, and I was like, if you're gonna put the belt on him, this is the year to do it. And you just looked at the layout of the different guys that he would be against. My thought was this: we're going into it. It's either going to be Ibushi winning it and winning both the matches, or Naito was going to retain. I don't think Jay White had any. Well, I don't say any shot, but I just didn't think it fit storyline wise or what they were going to do. I mean, obviously the match went 30 plus minutes between Naito and Ibushi. Very well done. A lot of back and forths. With Ibushi, somewhere that there were complaints about Ibushi losing he won the G1 climax, so he won the title shot, but then lost a shot to Jay White. So then why does he get to face Naito for a shot at the championship? And just how that all went down. I didn't mind that at all because I know they would have to have two main events as far as the two nights for at Wrestle Kingdom. But I said I think that Ibushi winning it was a good thing as far as beating Naito. Now Naito is in a little bit of limbo right now. We've seen him feuding with Honma, which is not exactly a glamorous feud that they have going on right now. But I think it's a placeholder for Naito because he's going to be right back in the title picture eventually. But Ibushi winning the championship, it was awkward though. I will admit that you win the championship, you have the two belts with you, and it's like, oh, by the way, you have to then defend the championship the next day against Jay White. So that was a little bit awkward, but I didn't mind that too much at all. And let's get to the second night of Wrestle Kingdom and what happened there. Let's see the exhibition. I did not, and now I need to go back and find it. I was unable to see, and the Stardom exhibition match. They didn't show it on video, but I would have really liked to have seen those six women compete because I mentioned in the preview show that I was unfamiliar with any one of them, and I wanted to get some more knowledge on them. I saw some pictures, and I mean pictures are good, but I really want to see some video, so I got to make sure to check that out. Actually, there are two Stardom exhibition matches. That's the women's wrestling organization in Japan. So I want to make sure to check that out because I'm going to go over the results and I see the winners. But I want to do that very, very soon. The KOPW, the King of Pro Wrestling, it's a weird deal. I mean, obviously, Toriano won it. He always finds a way to be deceptive and win the championship. And it's not really a championship. I guess it's more of a. At first, it started off as a voter or a fan ballot to determine who is the KOPW, and then you get to defend it. It's silliness in it, but I mean, whatever. That led off the night. As I mentioned earlier, the junior heavyweight championships were actually won by Kanemaru and El Desperado. They retained the championships. They defeated Master Wado and Taguchi. I think this match was pretty straightforward. And obviously, Kanemaru and El Desperado, they ended up losing the belts later on to, as I mentioned, El Fantasmo and Ishimori. Which I thought this match was okay. Nothing too out of the ordinary. Not too many highlights for me in that regard. Now for the never openweight championship, you had Takagi, the Dragon, against Jeff Cobb. Maybe one more physical matches that I've seen over the past few years. Both these guys, you knew would be aggressive, a lot of hard hitting, just the style of fighting that these two guys present. And that's exactly what we got in the competition. We saw headbutts, hard forearms, just a major, major physical event. And Takagi was able to retain the championship over Jeff Cobb, and now he's facing Tanahashi, which I think is a good matchup. Kind of contrasted styles. Takagi, the Dragon, we know is very physical, a lot of hard punches, and in that regard, and it's kind of counter to Tanahashi, who we've seen he's bulked up over the years and gotten stronger. We always see him do the little bodybuilding pose before every match, but he still likes to use his speed, high flyer. I mean, his knees are not what they used to be, and so he's not doing as much high flying. So he's more of a ground attack. But I think Takagi is probably going to retain the never open weight championship. But I think it's a good feud with Tanahashi because it's a contrast in styles. So, but I thought that the some were saying that Takagi Jeff Cobb match was maybe the best one out of the entire uh, weekend or of those two cards. I think it's right up there. I think it was a very very good contest, so I liked that. Sanada was able to defeat Evil, the battle of the former brothers that used to be in Los Econopolis. They hop on together. Sanada going over, I think, is understandable. Sanada's an interesting case for me. I Cold Skull is the perfect description of him because I watch him, I want to like him, I really do. He's got a good build. He's a good wrestler, solid in the ring. But the personality is just so blah for me, and maybe that's a good thing because it's contrast to some of the other top guys like Okada and Naito, and now Ibushi, who you have to put in the top of the card right now. Obviously, he's the double champ. But I just look at Sonata, and he's there. But I think that he fits the essay. I do think that's part of his character, his approach, that he is kind of cold blooded or cold skull and doesn't show too many emotions. I know he does a little finger to the air when he wants to get the cheers going, gets for fans to support him. But outside of that, he's very robotic. I don't think he's robotic in his wrestling style. I think he's a good wrestler, but his personality is just whatever. But yeah, it's just very interesting to see kind of where they go with that. And obviously, he's now the number one contender against Ibushi for the title. We'll see what happens there. My match, I mean, personally, my favorite match, I think, out of the entire card over the 2 days was Takahashi able to defeat Ishimori for the light heavyweight championship. As I said, I think Hiromu is a star and a major, this great wrestler, personality wise and physically. And it's really a miracle story. I mean, just him breaking his neck a few years ago to now be back in the ring doing all the stuff that he does. I think that he is just a tremendous talent. And then we'll wrap up obviously with Jay White. He challenged Ibushi for the double championships, was unable to win the championship. Ibushi dealt with the distractions and dealt with all the other stuff that the Bullet Club throws at you, and was able to come out with the victory. I will admit, Jay White's maybe not only my favorite wrestler in New Japan, but maybe my favorite wrestler in all of pro wrestling currently, right now. I mean, he fits the bill of everything. Physically looks like a champ, fights like a champ, can talk on the mic, a tremendous heel heat, just a good bad guy. I always mark out as a wrestling fan when he says he sold out Madison Square Garden single handedly. I'm a New Yorker, so anytime you mention MSG, you're gonna get my support. But he adds all of those elements together as a major champion. But right now, he is not in the picture at all. He's gone radio silent on social media. You're not seeing him at any of the cards. I recommend that you go back and listen to his promo after he lost to Kota and mention all the sacrifices that he's made and being in Japan and all the stuff that's going on in his life. And he really put everything into winning that championship, and it did not work out for him. And in the end, he lost to the better man, though. Kota, I thought, wrestled the match of his life in that contest against Jay White. I thought it was. I mentioned the match before. I thought the two best matches of the entire card was the light heavyweight championship between Hiromu and Ishimori, and then obviously this one between Ibushi and Jay White. And I said Ibushi's the champ right now. I think he's very popular. I mean, physically, I mean, he's the best looking guy physically in the entire. I don't say the entire industry, but I mean, as far as New Japan, I mean, the guy is muscles on muscles, which is a good thing. I mean, he looks like a physical freak. It's his fighting style is he does it all. I mean, there's not a weakness. He can fly, he can punch, he can. I mean, he's the kicks. We all know about his kicking background. I mean, the guy can do it all. And right now, he's the man of the hour and the champion. And I don't. As I said, I think he's going to keep the championship for a good little while. I don't see Sanada being a major challenger to Ibushi, but we'll see what happens and what goes on from there. I think what you need to figure out right now for New Japan, and we'll wrap up this portion of our analysis. You got to figure out what you're going to do with Jay White. And I know he's on the last year of his contract, and that's the business side of things. And they may be playing that up for some kayfabe purposes and all of that stuff. But you got to figure out what to do with that guy, because to me, if New Japan wants to continue their growth, especially in the United States and really around the world, you need a premier English speaking guy near either as your champion or competing for the championship. I mean, my Japanese is non-existent. I mean, it's a little okay because you listen to enough of it, watching these shows and hearing guys talk, you can finally put together a word or two. But when if you're trying to go into the United States like they are, and I know the pandemic has kind of limited a lot of this stuff, so it's a different world. But if you're trying to head to Europe and Australia, and get those markets, you need an English speaker like a Jay White. Interesting. I mean, Jay White's from New Zealand. He's not even American or European, but I mean that doesn't matter. It's just a unique background for Jay White. But that's when you have a guy who can talk like he does, can cut the promos like he can in English. That's an awesome thing. So I don't. He may be dealing with some injuries and other things, so because he's been going hard the past few years. You gotta give him credit for that. But they need to resolve that and figure it out. What is up with him as far as does he come back for the New Japan Cup? If there is a New Japan Cup, what they need to situate that. And I think you also need to situate because once I think Ibushi alleviates once he beats Sanada, I guess you can go to the other two guys who are former double champs I guess Evil could be in the running, and then Naito. I said I like Hanma. That's our guy. I mean, we like Hanmania. I mean, that's a great thing. Another great story with him being able to come back from injury and become a wrestler again, dealing with the same, well, not the same neck issues as Hiromu did, but still, a guy who's been around for a long time and built himself up. I think you need to figure out where you go, with that, as far as where I get it, but I think Evil and Naito. I think those are the guys who are, you're probably going to be able to see do some things. And as far as what they've been kind of doing after Wrestle Kingdom and some of the kind of secondary matches that you're trying to see, I mean, Doki and Jado, I think have been beefing with each other, so that's been interesting. Uh, I think you're gonna with the light heavyweights with El Phantasmo and Ishimori. I do think you're going to be able to see. They're probably going to defend again against El Desperado and Kanamura. They have good chemistry together. I think you'll be able to see some things there. The A smart move has been having Okan and Will Ospreay kind of be in a nice little mini feud with Kojima and Tenzan because one, that's those are veterans that both those guys can continue to build from and learn from, but also they're beatable guys. Because Okan and Osprey are going to just take care of Tenzan and Kojima. I guess they're going to now have a no disqualification match coming up, so they're going to dispatch of them and get them back to winning ways. So I think that's a good move for the Empire as far as Osprey and Okan. And I'm trying to think what else. I guess Evil and Okada are kind of putting themselves in a feud with each other. That's interesting as far as where they can go with that. Obviously, I think Okada is. I mean, he's been the face of New Japan for the past 4 or 5 years. I think he can call his shot for any title anytime he wants. So I think him and Evil feuding is a good. I think the winner of that can in an Evil, if he gets past Okada, that's a nice mark for him. So I think the winner of that can put themselves in line for a title shot in a big way. And and then also Master Wado and Bushi are having some tensions. That's a good matchup for Wado because that'll give him the chance to be in the ring with the veteran and continue to develop his skills as a light heavyweight. So I'm not mad at that feud at all. And then we've touched on all the other ones that we're seeing. Obviously, I guess Honma and Naito are kind of beefing, so that'll be. I think Naito can get past Honma. Honma is almost at to the point where he's untouchable, or not untouchable. That he if he loses a bunch of matches, it's going to be okay because he's over just as Honma. So that's not a problem there. So Naito needs to beat somebody up to get his mojo back, that's a good guy to go with. And then I said that Takagi and Tanahashi, that's gonna be a really awesome matchup for the never open weight championship. I could really see that going either way. I think Tanahashi with that belt will be a nice little because he's never won it before. He's won everything else in New Japan, so that's a nice mark for him to be a never open weight champion. Takagi's also a beast as well. I think that's awesome. I think Jeff Cobb. We haven't seen him in this tour, but if Takagi and Cobb wanted to go at it again, I would have no issues with that at all. That'd be an awesome rematch. And then Ibushi and Sanada, we've I talked about it earlier. I think that Ibushi is going to win that and keep it going. But Sonata, if this is a good time for him to step up and become a champion or try to become the heavyweight champion of the world. I don't think this is his time that he's ultimately going to do it, but we'll see what happens there. All right, let's move on to WrestleMania. Not WrestleMania. I was thinking of Hanma and then Hanma Mania. We're gonna move on to the Royal Rumble with WWE. That takes place this weekend with the only 5 matches. Well, it's the Rumble. That takes up half the card anyway. But obviously, what we have scheduled as we record the show right now is that we're gonna have the tag team match for the WWE Women's Tag Championship. I wrote that down really awkward. But in essence, Asuka and Charlotte Flair, the champions, are going to face Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler. I mean, I really don't care too much for this match at all. I know that Ric Flair's turned on Charlotte is now with Lacey Evans, and that's supposed to be kind of the swerve or twist. Maybe Lacey will come in there and mess things up and give the belts to Nia and Baszler. But I really have no interest in this matchup right now at all. So we'll just see what happens there. Um, Drew McIntyre is going to face Goldberg. I mean, Goldberg, when you bring these guys back, I think there should be more excitement for it. And if Goldberg was in the Rumble, I think there honestly be more excitement as an entrant than him fighting for the title against Drew McIntyre. You see any way, honestly and objectively, that Goldberg should have any shot against Drew McIntyre? I don't see that at all. I just think that there a lack creativity of building up a contender for Drew McIntyre, and they just thought, oh, we'll go to Goldberg. I just don't get it at all. McIntyre should win this match pretty handily and beat him up. Now, a feud that I have been interested in has been Roman Reigns with Paul Heyman. He's going to face Kevin Owens for the Universal Championship. The Roman Reigns evolution has been tremendous over the past 4 months, or 5 months, or a half year since he's come back from sabbatical and has gone come back into WWE. His heel turn with Paul Heyman has been tremendous. I think with his cousin Uso has been brought some family elements into it. I think Reigns. This is the Reigns that we've been looking for over the past few years. This is a guy that we've been looking for to use his physicality, use his size, get rid, even visual, getting rid of that bulletproof vest or flak jacket or whatever you want to call it, and showing off the upper body and the tattoos and the size. I don't like him keeping the same music. I think they need to ditch that and really go all the way with it. But baby steps. But I think him with Heyman has been good. You've seen a seriousness with them and a tone with him. I also think that this sets up some fun times when Brock Lesnar comes back, and he's coming back at some point. Well, obviously, Paul Heyman being the advocate. I don't know why they just don't call him a manager, but Vince McMahon doesn't like managers, is what it is. But for now, I'll say advocate. But Paul Heyman being Reigns' advocate, and obviously being Brock's advocate, and you could say, well, maybe you could have two advocates, or you could have an advocate, you could have two clients. Not the way that Paul rolls. Paul's gonna turn on either Roman or Brock, so that's gonna set up some fun stuff. Probably WrestleMania, but I think, but Owens is one of the rare guys who can actually match Heyman, relatively speaking, on the mic, and has that attitude and has that I don't give a crap, approach to things, and can match up with Roman Reigns. So I'm looking forward to that being a really good matchup. I think Reigns retains the championship, but Owens is a guy who can put up a good fight in and outside of the ring. So I'm very intrigued by that. As far as who's going to win the Rumble, with the women, I think my pick and what I would do is put Rhea Ripley in the Rumble and have her win it. That would be my pick, my choice, as far as who I would go with. And then Ripley can go several directions. She could rematch Charlotte Flair. They faced off in WrestleMania last year, and I thought it was maybe the best match of all the WrestleMania from last year. But if they could get together again this year, she can go over to face either Bailey or Sasha Banks, and whoever's the champion at that point for the other belt. I think there's a lot that they can go with as far as that championship. So I'll go with Rhea Ripley and have her make her main main roster debut technically and be the champion for the men. Whew, man, maybe go with Brock Lesnar. That's as crazy as it sounds. I think Brock needs to be back. And the good part about the him winning the Royal Rumble is he can win the Royal Rumble, and you don't see him again until WrestleMania because he'll be the number one contender. And you can have him do videos and do some other things and not actually be in the ring because I think Brock is best when he's used less and in that regard. So that's the way I would book it. I would have Brock win the men's Royal Rumble and then assert himself into some things. As I'm looking at the card right now, or some of the major play. I'm trying to see. Yeah, I look at the Rumbles, people. No surprises really as far as who's been announced. For the women, as I said, you have your usual suspects. Yeah, nothing too out of the ordinary as far as that goes. As far as the men, okay, Edge is going to be in the Rumble. We already, well, he announced that. That would have been a nice little surprise if they held that off. But Edge would not be the worst choice in the world. Obviously, Randy Orton, we've seen him in a prominent light. Obviously, got his face burnt off or burned by Alexa Bliss in that silly angle. Big E would be of interest if they really wanted. They've been pushing Big E a little bit more than normal, so that would be a fun little. If he won that, that'd be a nice little surprise, and I think that he can carry himself in a major way. I mean, obviously AJ Styles or Daniel Bryan, if they won it, it wouldn't be the most insulting thing in the world. Pretty wide open though, as far as even Sami Zayn. I could talk myself into Sami Zayn winning the Royal Rumble in some shadiness in a weird way. So yeah, it's a. I think the Rumble should be intriguing, should be interesting as far as how they want to go in that route. And we got to conclude today's show, and I will touch on AEW more in our next show when we do the recap of the Royal Rumble. And I'll make sure to devote some time to it and have some notes for you. Yeah, AEW has been interesting. I don't understand what the benefit is of having this TNA and AEW allegiance, especially with the Elite or the Bullet Club. It's very confusing and very a lot of inside stuff. Obviously, I know about the Good Brothers. We know about Gallows and Anderson, so that's not like a shock as far as. But they go, but they make it seem like, oh my God, they're in AEW with the TNA Championship, and then you have the Good Brothers, appearing on AEW TV, and then you have Kenny Omega and the Young Bucks now on TNA TV. I just think that AEW is, if you're gonna go that route, I don't think TNA is necessarily right promotion. I thought MLW would be more intrigue. New Japan would be awesome, but obviously we have everything going on right now. Having travel for going to New Japan and back and forth is not an option, and I get all of that. But I just don't see how it's great for TNA because TNA is pretty much on a second or third rate channel in the middle of Canada recording their stuff. And no disrespect to those wrestlers. I mean, I like Don Callis. I like the Good Brothers, and some of the other guys and Swan, and they got some good talents over there at TNA. But I just don't think it's equivalent or equal. We've seen invasions before when ECW invaded WWE or WWF back then. You could see benefits for both sides. uh, Jim Cornette did an interesting breakdown of when the NWA invaded WWF back in the late '90s. By the way, I love Jim Cornette. He's my favorite podcast going right now as far as wrestling goes. He does a great job. So respect to Jim and Brian Last and those guys. But I heard his breakdown of the NWA invading WWF back in the late '90s, and obviously WWF was in a much better position than NWA at that time. But you can see benefits for both sides and exposure and bringing some people over. It was interesting. I just don't see what the benefit for AEW is bringing guys in and beating up your talent from another organization. And then Tony Khan, who's the owner of AEW, wink wink being in on it, doing promotions and promos that are airing on TNA television. He's supposed to be a disgruntled and mean owner and unhappy these guys are coming. He should be pissed off that Kenny Omega, his world champion, brought in these two galoops from this other organization and are beating up all my guys. And furthermore, he's now have my tag team champions in the Young Bucks. They're turning on my people and my organization and beating up all of my AEW folks. Tony Khan should be extremely pissed and mad and angry and irritated and all the adjectives you can think of. But he's kind of going with the flow and doing commercials on there in a very awkward way with Tony Schiavone on TNA television. I just don't get it at all. Look, we all know that things are predetermined and scripted, and this is all business and they're in it together. But darn, at least give me some suspension of disbelief and show some anger in that regard. But yeah, but I think that's been very awkward how everything's been going on there. But we'll see how that develops. And as I said, I'll give more of a breakdown of my AEW thoughts a little bit deeper on my next show. But that concludes today's broadcast of the Verbal Submission podcast. As always, if you want to follow everything that we're doing, you can head to thesportsinquirer.net. You can also go to our social media platforms on Twitter and Instagram under Sports Inquirer. That's on one word. Facebook, same deal. We have some pages on there. And then finally, subscribe to us on YouTube, SoundCloud, Spotify, Google Podcasts, and iTunes. Until next time, good fight, good night, be safe.